Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's another beautiful day on the internet to talk about sourcing. Today is what we're going to talk about. So you're going to need sources for your stories. So we're going to talk about how you can find them. And that'll be good because good sources equal better work. And better work equals better grades. Yay. All right, so first of all, why do you need sources? So rule number one is that you have to remember that journalists are not experts, right? Our job is to talk to experts and translate their wisdom. We are objective, not subjective. So we go out and talk to people, see what they have to think, and then put that on the page, right? Sources add context and information for you and the reader. So, you don't know everything. You go out to get the story by talking to people who have the story. So you kind of have to figure out who to talk to when you are figuring out your sources, right? You've got some random story. You need to sort of back up and be like, all right, like who should I theoretically talk to for this? Now, I generally think there are I classify sort of three types of sources, and most stories will have all three. Not all will have all three, but most will have all three. So the first group are academics. So think of these people as professors who work at a university and study a topic. All right, they do studies, all kinds of research. They're super steeped in knowledge on this one particular topic. They're thinkers, more or less. Then you have experts. So these are people who actually work in the field. So they're not sitting at a university researching what's happening out in the world. They are the ones that are out in the world doing the thing. These are sort of the doers, if that makes sense. So here's an example, how to differentiate the two. Let's say you're writing a story about politics. So an academic would be someone with a PhD in the political science department of a university who studies politics and how it works. The expert, sort of the insider, would be someone who is an actual politician or policymaker. Finally, you have regular people. So including quotes from people who are quote-unquote real, for lack of a better way to say that, it helps the story because it kind of gives you a sense of, it gives you someone that the reader can identify with, and it gives the reader a sense of how do real people think about this, or how is this story shaping the lives of real people. And obviously, you guys probably already know this, but when you're thinking about sourcing, make sure that you are talking to multiple sources, often who might give you opposing viewpoints. You don't want sources only from one side. So let's run through a quick example of these. Let's say you're writing a story about Kendrick Lamar's album Damn and how it changed rap and how it sort of shaped the future of rap. So who would you talk to for that? A couple ideas. So here's an academic. Her name is Cheryl L. Keyes. She's a professor of ethnomusicology at UCLA. Now look at her bio there. She's the author of Rap Music and Street Consciousness. She is recognized as a pioneer of hip-hop studies. Sounds like a pretty good person to be able to talk to who could sort of put this album in the context of all those that have come before it, right? Then here's an expert. So this guy is named Anthony Fontano, and he runs this blog called The Needle Drop. He's basically a hip-hop music critic, and he's a really well-respected one. He's going to give you more of sort of an on-the-ground expert sense of what did this mean in the hip-hop scene, because he's going to have his finger on the pulse of the actual hip-hop scene far better than an academic would. And if you think about it, you're going to get different quotes from these people, right? So the academic source here, Cheryl, she's probably going to put things in a really, sort of smart, buttoned-up way that'll sound kind of like overly academic, but really be insightful. You might talk to this guy, and it'll sound more like a sort of regular person who just happens to know absolutely everything and can put things in context. He'll probably drop a few F-bombs maybe if you're lucky. So that kind of gives you these different voices in your piece. And then a regular person. So how do you find a regular person? We'll talk about a few other ways to find them, but Reddit is a really good way. So here's the Hip Hop Heads Reddit thread. Here's a discussion about the album Damn, started a year after its release, and here's a whole thread of real people talking about what influence did this album have on rap? You can click the people who say things. So if you find someone who has a really insightful comment, you could click their name and send them a direct message and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this topic. And most of the time, they will be willing to talk to you. How do you find academics? So one way is to read studies. Studies are where you find hard data. We're going to talk about that later in the course. And you can easily find academics through studies. So if you were to say, find a study about rap music, the author affiliation will always be on the study. So if you look at this one we have here on the right, at the bottom of that, you can see in red, author affiliations. It's listing the names of the people who did the study, and it usually will have their emails, so you can reach out directly to them. You can go through schools to find academics. So a good move is to just find out what schools are going to be the strongest in research around the topic that you're writing on. So for example, UNLV is really strong in hospitality. We're also really strong in gaming. So if you need someone to talk about hospitality and gaming, it would make sense to contact someone at UNLV, right? And you can go to the school's department faculty page and look at bios to sort of target in on the very specific person you want, and their email will always be in there as well. You can also just email a school's PR person and be like, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm writing about, I'm looking for a source on X, can you help me find that person? And they usually will help. You can find academics and experts through blogs. So a lot of experts and academics have their own blogs. They're pretty easy to discover if you just sort of Google around creatively and follow links within stories. People just write about stuff that interests them and they put it on their own websites or whatever. But also another thing that's interesting is you'll get a lot of information from these, but if someone's blogging, it usually indicates that they have a willingness to share what's on their mind. So they'll usually always want to talk to you. So you can just look up, you can even Google things like 25, most influential blogs in whatever topic, and you'll usually be able to find someone. So a way to find academics, experts, and real people, Twitter and Facebook, great way to find sources. A lot of academics and experts live on Twitter, especially a lot of people who do research, and they'll sort of be tweeting about their topic, but then they'll often have debates between different academics will have debates, and that can kind of give you ideas of how different people see things, give you story ideas. And you can usually contact those people either through Twitter, or maybe you find them on Facebook if they're also active there, and you just shoot them a message and just say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm doing, etc. So Facebook is particularly great for locating a specific real person. One way to do it is, let's say you're looking for a real person who's kind of obscure, hard to find. You see this person mentioned in maybe like local news or some sort of other story in a Facebook group. You can just go in and look them up on Facebook when you think you found them, shoot them a message. I think you can pay, if you have friends in common, the message will automatically pop up in their inbox. If you don't, I think it gets sent to their, like, sort of a weird holding thing, but I think you can pay $1 and the message will pop up in their main mailbox. So it's worth spending that $1 to do that, because they'll see it. They probably won't see it if it gets banished to like this weird, maybe this is spam email. So an example of this, one time I was writing a story about people who, unbeknownst to them, bought a house that used to be used as a meth lab. So when someone uses a house as a meth lab, it contaminates the entire house, and then they'll often move out. Someone will buy the house after, not knowing what it was used for, and there's all this like toxic stuff in the house that you can't see, and their health will start to suffer. So I was writing this story for Scientific American, and I wanted to find a real person who had actually moved into one of these houses without knowing it and then had health problems. So I started looking at just local news sites from all around the country, especially areas that had a lot of meth problems, which is a lot of states. But I found this lady who lived in Utah from just a local paper in Utah. That was her story. She moved into this meth house. Her kids started getting sick. She started getting sick. Then they found out that it was used as a meth house. They immediately got out. So I had her name just from this local news story. So I went into Facebook, plop the name in. I could kind of filter it and be like, oh, okay, there's like 20 people with a name in the country, but here's one in Utah. That's definitely her. So I just shot her a message on Facebook. She wrote back and I ended up interviewing her, and she was like a huge part of the story. So it's easier than you might think. Reddit and Quora are also good sources of real people, like we just saw in the Kendrick Lamar example. Another way to find experts in academics is through sort of like societies, groups, and businesses. So a lot of groups and businesses do a lot of research on their own. It's usually pretty reliable, and they're happy to talk to you about what they found, sort of talk about their position. So examples here, like the American Heart Association, they do a ton of research on heart health. Natural Resources Defense Council is great for environmental issues. A company like Abbott Nutrition, they do all kinds of supplements, etc. They do a ton of in-house research. There's a ton of private companies that are doing a lot of really interesting things. They're usually happy to talk to you. One thing you do have to be careful about, though, is that most of these nonprofits and businesses have some sort of agenda, right? They either want to like get their message out or sell you stuff. So you just kind of have to be a little more wary, whereas an academic is going to be pretty much down the middle. It's like, here's what the science says. I don't really care either way. A nonprofit or business is kind of going to want to always make sure they look good, if that makes sense. You can find experts in the government. So the government collects a ton of data. They are often required to share it with you, and that's because your tax dollars paid for it. So you paid for the info. You might as well use it, right? Government stuff, it's usually best to go through a PR person or a PIO. The government usually tends to be pretty formal. So just going through their PR person, you can find that by, like, let's say you want to talk to the Las Vegas Metro PD. You could go on their site. You'll usually just have to look around. There'll be like a news or press section or press inquiries section. You'll have to search around for it. You find that, you'll usually get the name of someone who handles all their media inquiries. These people are generally great to work with. Right now I'm doing a story that involves Special Forces soldiers. So I'm working with a guy who's the press officer for one of the bases on the East Coast, and he's awesome to work with. You just, go through him. You obviously got to be super respectful, tell them exactly what you need, and they'll usually go ahead and help you find it, put you in touch with the right people. So let's say you're trying to get in touch with someone who's a little more famous, like an athlete, a celebrity, etc. A good way to start is to see if you can find the person's agent. So that person obviously, they're getting paid to get the person press because it sort of improves her stock. If you're trying to get in touch with an author, try either a publisher or see if you can find out who their agent is. If it doesn't work, you can always try going through a team. Some teams are helpful, some aren't. I've worked with a lot of teams in all different leagues, and you'll find that some are great, and then others are just like, nah, we don't deal with any press. So it's just kind of hit or miss. A lot of times, you'll get a no on these, but doesn't matter. You might as well try. The worst they can say is no. Finally, so you've talked to an expert, an academic, a real person. Always ask who else you should talk to when you're doing the interview. So you ask it at the end. This is pretty straightforward because people know people, right? So an expert's going to know other experts, academics will know other academics, and they'll often guide you into another source or a better source, or they could maybe help you find some research that'll be useful. So always ask that question. And that is all we have for today. This concludes this presentation. We will see you next time.